Chapter 17, Meeting with de Gruel. In a vast room used as a meeting hall by the giant King de Gruel, the preparations for the upcoming meeting with Demon Lord Rimuru finally came to an end. De Gruel and his brother Grain were already seated around the massive table in the center of the room, waiting for their guests to arrive. De Gruel sat in calm silence, but Grain was a nervous wreck, anxiously pacing through the possible outcomes of this meeting. Grain turned to his brother and spoke up. Why would they even want a meeting? Big brother, you didn't tell me anything. I could understand if it were just Demon Lord Rimuru, but two demon lords? One of them is a primordial demon, and to top it all off, they have a true dragon with them. That is completely terrifying. Do you think it's because of our recent trouble with the vampires? But Guy Crimson explicitly said he didn't care about our conflict. This doesn't make any sense. And besides, why are they so late? Brother, shouldn't they be here by now? De Gruel kept his eyes closed, looking as though he were meditating. He calmly answered his brother without looking up. They aren't late. They are giving us time to properly prepare for their arrival and get ourselves ready. Honestly, you should consider them generous for not suddenly barging in. Given the company we are waiting for, that wouldn't be out of the question. Grain looked skeptical. Is Demon Lord Rimuru really the type to do something like that? I don't know much about Rimuru, de Gruel replied. But I am talking about Velgrind, the Scorched Dragon. Veldora told me plenty of stories about her personality. According to him, she is a devil incarnate who used to kill him over and over again. If what Veldora said is true, I wouldn't expect her to wait around patiently. She'd be much more likely to just storm right in. Grain's jaw dropped at the news. Wow! And here I thought the Storm Dragon was the most violent one of the family. Poor Veldora, Grain muttered, feeling a genuine hint of pity for the dragon. Suddenly, a guard burst into the room, completely out of breath and looking utterly panicked. He tried to speak but couldn't catch his breath. After a long minute, he finally managed to gasp out his warning. De Gruel-sama. We have an emergency. The Violet Primordial. Before he could finish his sentence, a small hand rested gently on his shoulder. When the guard turned around to see who it was, he froze in sheer terror. Standing right behind him was Ultima, smiling menacingly. She was releasing a terrifying aura that made the guard's miserable situation even worse. Hey there, Ultima said sweetly. You know it's incredibly rude to run away and leave us standing outside, right? And when you're running away from my lord, it's practically a sin. We had to find our way in here all by ourselves. The more she spoke, the tighter her grip became on the guard's shoulder, nearly crushing it completely. Rimuru finally decided to speak up before things went too far. He was already completely used to these kinds of antics from the primordial demons. Ultima, that's enough. You're going to scare the poor guy to death. As you wish, my lord, Ultima replied, immediately letting go of the guard. Rimuru sighed. Like I said, just calling me Rimuru is fine. As you wish, Rimuru-sama. De Gruel and Grain sat there completely speechless, just listening to the exchange between the Violet Primordial and Rimuru. They both realized the same shocking truth: she has a name, and she has a physical body. They had clashed with the Violet Primordial several times in the past, so seeing her named and completely loyal to a new master was enough to shake even de Gruel. He quickly regained his composure, stood up from his seat, and welcomed his guests. Welcome, Demon Lord Rimuru and companions. I apologize for the modest reception, but we had very little time to prepare. Don't worry about it, King of the Giants, Rimuru replied smoothly. We're the ones who demanded a meeting on such short notice. Let's not waste any time and get right down to business. De Gruel nodded, and everyone took their seats. Velgrind sat on Rimuru's right, while Milim took the left side with Gaia sleeping soundly in her lap. Ultima and Rain took their position standing directly behind Rimuru. De Gruel started the conversation. So, what brings you here today, Demon Lord Rimuru? Or perhaps I should call you the Chaos Creator? Rimuru is fine, he answered. And as for why I'm here, I have an offer for you. An offer? I want you to join the Octagram. Grain gasped in shock, but de Gruel remained perfectly calm, showing no signs of surprise. He sat in silence for a solid 5 minutes, deeply weighing the benefits and drawbacks of the proposal. Finally, he looked up. I accept. Rimuru blinked, completely caught off guard by how fast he agreed. Ooh? Really? No questions or anything? I've thought it over, and I only see benefits for myself, de Gruel explained. Though, I won't be able to leave this place very often. I still have a duty to guard the Heavenly Tower. Oh, that's not an issue at all, Rimuru smiled. We don't meet up all that often anyway. Then I have just one condition, de Gruel said. What's that? I want to remain the sole ruler of this territory. Velgrind, who had been bracing herself for a massive demand, let out a soft chuckle. Rimuru nodded. Of course we can arrange that. We aren't going to just hand your land over to another demon lord, so don't worry. De Gruel looked visibly relieved, and the tension in the room instantly vanished. We've prepared a banquet for you, de Gruel offered warmly. Would you care to stay, or do you have to leave immediately? Milim, who had been completely silent until now, suddenly jumped up with her eyes wide with excitement. A banquet? Please, Rimuru, let's stay. Please? Velgrind buried her face in her hands, utterly embarrassed by her niece's complete lack of manners. Rimuru couldn't help but laugh internally. And people call me a glutton when Milim is right here. He smiled out loud and said, all right, I guess we can stay for a little bit. But we really do have to move out right after. We have a lot on our schedule today. Splendid. Let's change locations then, de Gruel said, standing up to lead his guests out of the meeting room and toward the banquet hall. Rimuru followed close behind, thinking to himself, all right, that's one down. Now we just have to go deal with Luminous. Chapter 18, Education is Important. The meeting wrapped up incredibly fast thanks to de Gruel's surprising cooperation, and the group moved to the banquet hall to enjoy the feast. The food was surprisingly fantastic, and everyone dug in. Milim and Gaia were especially thrilled. Ever since Gaia's revival, the two had become practically inseparable, and Rimuru was amused by how identical their behavior really was. While Rimuru was relaxing and enjoying the sight of his friends being happy, he happened to overhear a conversation between de Gruel and Velgrind. De Gruel, Velgrind said casually. I felt my little brother's presence around here recently. I hope he hasn't been causing you any trouble. Oh, not at all, de Gruel replied honestly. He drops by to spar with me from time to time, and I actually enjoy the company. Well, just be careful, Velgrind warned. He is an absolute problem child. I'd hate for him to accidentally blow away your entire kingdom. De Gruel let out a hearty chuckle, which only left Velgrind looking confused and slightly annoyed. It was a serious warning, why was he laughing? Didn't he take her seriously? Did I say something funny? Velgrind asked, her tone sharpening. No, not at all, de Gruel smiled. It's just that now I finally understand what Veldora meant. But I will keep it in mind. Thank you for the warning, Velgrind. Velgrind's confusion deepened. She wondered what in the world Veldora had been saying behind her back. What exactly do you mean by that? What did my little brother tell you? He told me all about how terrifyingly strong and ruthless his older sisters can be, de Gruel explained. I always knew Velgrind-san and Velzad-san were powerful, but to be strong enough to completely horrify Veldora? That is truly impressive. Now, under normal circumstances, a calm and serious man like de Gruel would never have shared this. But because it was a celebration, he had lowered his poison resistance and was a little drunk. He had absolutely no idea he was leading his friend Veldora straight into an ambush. Velgrind's smile turned dangerously sweet. What an interesting story. Are you sure he wasn't just talking about Velzad? Surely he couldn't have meant me, right? Rimuru, who was watching this unfold from across the table, went pale. He knew he had to step in immediately, or his dragon friend was going to receive a brutal, life-threatening lesson. Velgrind-san, what do you think about the— Not now, Rimuru, Velgrind interrupted smoothly, never breaking eye contact with the giant. I'm having a very fascinating conversation with de Gruel here. So, de Gruel, what else did he say? To an outsider, her smile looked beautiful, but to anyone who actually knew Velgrind, it was the face of pure doom. Right, de Gruel continued, completely oblivious. He said both of his sisters were equally ruthless. But honestly, I respect that. If I had a younger brother running around causing chaos, I'd give him a proper thrashing too. A good education is important. He genuinely had no clue what kind of nightmare he had just unleashed on Veldora. I see, Velgrind said, her menacing smile widening. Rimuru, I think I'll need to pay a quick visit to my brother as soon as we finish our little trip. Rimuru shuddered. Yep, the rumors about her are completely true. Deep down, he offered a silent prayer for Veldora's survival. Standing up from the table, Rimuru decided it was time to exit. Thank you so much for the hospitality, de Gruel. The meal was absolutely delicious, but we really must get going. We'll be in touch regarding the Walpurgis meeting with the other demon lords. The rest of his entourage stood up and prepared to leave. Of course, de Gruel nodded. It was an honor to have you here, Demon Lord Rimuru. No need for all the formalities, Rimuru laughed. Just Rimuru is fine. We're fellow demon lords now, after all. Grain stepped forward and bowed deeply. And before you leave, I want to thank you for saving our country. We saw you step in and stop what could have been a total catastrophe. Think nothing of it, Rimuru waved it off. I was just helping a friend calm down. We'll take our leave now. With that, Rimuru and his group exited the palace, setting a course straight for Luminous Valentine's territory. Back in the meeting hall, Grain turned to his brother with a worried look. Big brother, was it really a good idea to tell Velgrind-sama about your private chats with Veldora? The moment Grain said it, the alcohol cleared from de Gruel's system, and he froze solid as the reality of what he had done sunk in. It was far too late to fix it. He quietly joined Rimuru in praying for the Storm Dragon's safety. Meanwhile, over in the castle of the Vampire Queen, a certain paladin was enduring pure mental exhaustion. Ever since she had been separated from Chloe, Hinata had become the favorite target of a certain vampire known for her intense fondness for cute girls. Despite being thrilled to finally have her physical body back, Hinata practically wished she could crawl back inside Chloe's soul just to hide. Luminous was constantly teasing her, or worse, treating her like a dress-up doll, forcing her into all kinds of embarrassing outfits. Most of them were so revealing that Hinata swore if anyone other than Chloe and Luminous ever saw her in them, she would have to personally eliminate the witnesses. While Hinata was stuck in her room reluctantly dealing with a ridiculous bunny costume, Luminous and Chloe were waiting out in the throne room. Luminous was full of eager anticipation, while Chloe felt incredibly guilty for her friend, though secretly relieved that she wasn't the one being forced to wear it. What is taking her so long? Luminous complained. There's barely any fabric to put on in the first place. Luminous-sama, Chloe sighed. Do you really have to tease her like that? What do you mean? Luminous countered playfully. She needs to get used to it. We have thousands of years to spend together, so it's better she adjusts quickly. A cold shiver ran down Chloe's spine. Nearly 2,000 years. I feel so bad for Hinata. Suddenly, Granger burst into the throne room. Luminous glared at him, furious because she had explicitly ordered that she was not to be disturbed under any circumstances. Luminous-sama. We have a— Granger, Luminous interrupted, her voice dropping into a menacing tone as a terrifying aura flared around her. Didn't I tell you I would execute you if you dared to interrupt us? Are you truly ready for your punishment? Granger was completely drenched in sweat from the overwhelming pressure his queen was giving off. He dropped to his knees, desperate to get the news out before he was obliterated. My queen! The violet and blue primordials have arrived. The anger Luminous felt instantly vanished, replaced by a sudden wave of confusion and dread. She could handle a single primordial if she absolutely had to, assuming it wasn't Guy Crimson. But two of them? At the same time? Why were they here together? Wasn't the blue one completely loyal to Guy? Aside from Rain, Guy, and Mizari, the primordials were famous for being bitter rivals. It made no sense for them to be traveling together. Seeing his queen go pale, Granger quickly continued. They are demanding an immediate audience with you, my queen. An audience? Luminous spat, trying to regain her composure. What could they possibly want? They didn't say, my queen. They simply stated that they demand a meeting. Such arrogance, Luminous scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Go back and tell them to state their business first. If it actually sounds interesting, maybe I'll grant them a few minutes of my time. Chloe sat in silence, her mind racing. Wait, could this be Rimuru-sensei's doing? Maybe he came to visit, but why would he send Ultima and Rain ahead? Did he seriously recruit them? Chloe turned back to the Vampire Queen. Luminous, do you really think it's a good idea to? I don't care, Luminous cut her off sharply. I have zero time for arrogant demons who barge into my territory without a proper explanation. If they want to cause a scene, the two of us can easily handle them. Chloe's anxiety spiked. She knew that no matter how gentle and sweet Rimuru could be, the primordials serving under him were completely ruthless. Granger was walking straight into a death trap by delivering that message. A second later, the massive doors to the throne room violently exploded inward. The blast sent Granger flying across the room, crashing onto the floor right in front of Luminous, severely injured. Luminous instantly drew her sword and dropped into a battle stance. Chloe just let out a heavy sigh, already knowing it was bound to end up like this. Through the smoke of the shattered doorway, two figures calmly stepped into the room. They were radiating an incredibly dense, lethal pressure that sent a genuine chill straight down Luminous' spine. Ultima and Rain strolled into the throne room as if they owned the place. Ultima glanced over at her partner. Well, Rain, looks like we need to teach this blood-sucking leech a proper lesson. Imagine having the nerve to deny a direct request from our Lord. Rain didn't answer right away. She just stared blankly at the Vampire Queen, who was desperately bracing for impact. Finally, Rain nodded. As much as I hate to admit it, you're right. Like Velgrin-sama and de Gruel-sama just said, a good education is important. Ultima's face twisted into a terrifying, joyful smile as she locked eyes with Luminous. Let's play a little game, shall we? Chapter 19, Preventing a Disaster. While Rain and Ultima went ahead to secure the audience with the Vampire Queen, Rimuru, Velgrind, Milim, and Gaia waited a short distance outside the hidden city of Night Garden. Unlike the others, Rimuru was pacing around restlessly, overwhelmed by a terrible gut feeling. Velgrind, Milim, and Gaia, however, looked completely relaxed. Hey, do you guys think we should go in and check on them? Rimuru asked, his voice filled with worry. I have a really bad feeling about this. Rain by herself wouldn't be an issue, but sending Ultima with her is just asking for trouble. You are panicking over absolutely nothing, Rimuru, Velgrind sighed, relaxed. Just sit tight and wait. Rain is perfectly sensible, and Ultima is sharp. Besides, if a fight actually breaks out, it just means that Vampire brought it on herself. Yeah, but if a fight breaks out in there, it causes a massive headache for us, you know. Why would it? Velgrind asked carelessly. If they give us trouble, we just eliminate them. Honestly, the girls are probably just having a bit of fun. Those little leeches won't be an issue at all. Milim cheered happily from the side, entirely missing the gravity of the situation. Auntie is totally right, bestie. If they try to fight us, we'll just wipe them off the map. Her enthusiastic response only made Rimuru even more anxious. He slumped his shoulders in defeat. Great. I guess I just have to trust them on this. I really should have just gone in myself. Hinata and Chloe are both in there, too. I'm sure Chloe understands the situation and can calm Luminous down if she loses her temper. But knowing Luminous, what if she says something incredibly insulting in front of the primordials? No, let's not manifest that. Everything is going to be totally fine. I'm definitely just overthinking this. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed directly in his mind. Master, there is a... I know, Ciel, Rimuru thought back quickly. There's absolutely nothing to worry about, right? They wouldn't actually start a war in there. Actually, there is a highly statistically significant chance of exactly that happening, Ciel responded calmly. But there is no need to be a pessimist, Master. Rimuru chuckled internally, feeling a bit relieved by the familiar presence. Yeah, fair enough. Sorry about that, Ciel. After spending so much time together, I practically know exactly what you're going to say before you even finish the sentence. Please do not look at it negatively, Ciel replied smoothly. It simply proves how perfectly in sync the two of us truly are. Boom. A massive explosion suddenly rocked the entire area, and giant flames towered high over the night garden. Everyone jumped up, completely startled by the sudden racket. Velgrin's eyes narrowed instantly. What in the world is happening out there? Ooh, are we finally going to fight someone? Milim asked. For some reason, she looked absolutely thrilled about the chaos, and Gaia seemed to share that exact same enthusiasm. Rimuru didn't waste a second and called out internally. Ciel, what is going on over there? Ciel's voice replied smoothly in his mind. Report, Master. I tried to warn you, but you kept interrupting me. Rain and Ultima are currently engaged in a full-blown battle against Luminous Valentine. Meanwhile, Chloe is desperately trying to calm down the two demons. The realization hit Rimuru like a freight train. Wow, I completely messed up. So that's what she was trying to tell me. He quickly spun around to the others and shouted, Velgrind, Milim, Gaia. Let's move, right now, before those two blow up the entire place. With that, Rimuru took off like a rocket toward the castle, with the others following closely right behind him. Inside the shattered throne room, Chloe was shouting at the top of her lungs, completely desperate. Ultima! Rain! Please, just calm down. She didn't mean to insult Rimuru-sensei. She didn't even know it was Rimuru-sensei who sent you here. Chloe was doing everything in her power to pacify the two primordials, who looked 100% ready to assassinate Luminous on the spot. Luminous, on the other hand, was covered in minor cuts and scratches all over her body. Still, she stubbornly kept her sword pointed straight at Ultima and Rain. However, the moment she heard the name Ultima, Luminous realized something was terribly wrong. She already knew that the blue primordial had been named Rain, but there was absolutely no way the violet primordial had been named as well. What shocked her even more was Chloe's behavior. Ever since the fight started, Chloe hadn't drawn her weapon once. All she was doing was trying to protect Luminous by calming the demons down. Luminous couldn't help but feel a sudden pang of jealousy, wondering, does she really love him more than me? Suddenly, Ultima's expression hardened, completely stripping away any trace of her usual cute demeanor. As if we would ever allow some low-life vampire to insult our master and get away with it. Step aside, Chloe. Rain nodded right along with her, her voice icy cold. That's exactly right. As if we would ever let, ouch. Smack. Both Ultima and Rain instantly clutched their heads in pure agony. The culprit? A pair of brutal karate chops delivered straight to their skulls by none other than Rimuru himself. Seriously? Rimuru snapped, standing over them with an incredibly exasperated expression. I send you two out for 20 minutes, and you nearly trigger a world war? Go stand in that corner over there and think about what you did. Rimuru pointed aggressively toward a far corner of the throne room. Completely deflated, Ultima and Rain began to sulk like scolded toddlers, walking over to the timeout corner to receive their punishment. Standing in the corner, Ultima whispered quietly to her partner. Why is Rimuru-sama so incredibly mad at us? Is it because we didn't finish her off fast enough? Rain, who was actually starting to tear up from the intense scolding, didn't answer right away. Ultima continued to speculate. Or is it because he wanted to handle her himself, and we almost killed her before he could get the chance? This time, Rain looked up and shook her head, tears streaming down her face as she tried to answer. No. I think it is because we fought, even though Rimuru-sama explicitly told us that we should just talk. Ultima stared at her in absolute horror as the sheer gravity of their mistake finally set in. While the two demons were busy reflecting on their behavior, Rimuru used his sub-skills to instantly repair all the collateral damage caused to the throne room. Luminous, seeing Rimuru up close for the very first time, found herself blushing slightly at his appearance before her anger caught up to her. Her face flushed red with irritation, and she glared right at him. But before she could even open her mouth to yell, Chloe completely interrupted the tension. "Sensei! You actually came!" Chloe cheered with pure joy, throwing herself forward to wrap Rimuru in a massive hug. "Of course I did," Rimuru smiled warmly, returning the embrace. "I promised I would, didn't I?" The two smiled at each other, and after they separated, Rimuru turned his attention back to Luminous, who was still glaring at him with a furious expression. "You must be Luminous Valentine," Rimuru said politely. "I'm Demon Lord Rimuru Tempest. It's a true pleasure to meet you. Look, I am incredibly sorry for the trouble my subordinates caused. They are currently reflecting on their mistakes in the corner, so I promise it won't happen again." Hearing his casual, relaxed apology only made Luminous even angrier. She finally exploded. "I don't care who you are. You have the absolute audacity to stroll in here and act like absolutely nothing happened. First, you steal Chloe away from me, and then you send these two psychotic demons to attack my palace. And you honestly think you can just say sorry and make everything okay? Are you demon lords truly that dense and arrogant?" The moment those words left her mouth, a heavy silence fell over the room. She realized she had made a catastrophic mistake. The entire throne room was instantly flooded with an overwhelming, suffocating killing intent. Multiple people in the room were fully prepared to execute the vampire queen on the spot. The aura was led by two individuals in particular, making it physically difficult for anyone to even breathe, except for Rimuru. These two were none other than Velgrind and Milim. Rain and Ultima were releasing their auras too, but they couldn't actually move because they were still trapped in the timeout corner. "What exactly did you just call my bestie?" Milim asked. Her voice dropped to a dangerous, icy register that sent chills through the room. Lumina swallowed hard, realizing she had completely overstepped. Gaia looked equally upset, though because of his small dragon size, he mostly just looked adorable. Velgrin didn't say a single word, choosing instead to glare at Luminous with eyes that promised pure, unadulterated annihilation. Rimuru was completely at a loss for words, utterly unsure of how to calm his terrifying companions down. Fortunately, Chloe stepped in. She slipped right behind Luminous and delivered a swift, hard chop right to the top of her head. "Ouch! Chloe, what was that for?" Luminous cried out, clutching her head in pain. "Are you seriously asking me that?" Chloe scolded, her voice dead serious. "Do you truly not realize who these people are? If they decided to launch a full attack against you right now, even I wouldn't be able to protect you. Do you want the entire vampire race to be completely erased from existence? Think twice about what you say before you open your mouth." Luminous actually got visible tears in her eyes from the strict scolding, but oddly enough, she looked somewhat happy about it. The sight left Rimuru completely amused, and a hilarious thought crossed his mind. Wow, Luminous really is a total closet masochist, isn't she? Chloe had two distinct reasons for stepping in like that. The first was exactly what she told Luminous out loud. The second, however, was a deep-seated fear she never wanted to face again. For a brief second, Rimuru's eyes had flashed a dangerous, glowing red, and Chloe knew exactly what that meant. She had stepped in to save everyone in the room from a catastrophic disaster, vividly remembering what had happened during their very first encounter. Rimuru clapped his hands together loudly to break the tension. All right, let's everyone calm down. Everyone is a little stressed out, so let's just sit down and have a civilized chat, okay? Luminous looked incredibly relieved by his intervention. She cleared her throat, trying to regain her dignity, and replied, yes, quite. I apologize for my outburst. Let's sit down and discuss the business you came here for. Rimuru nodded, glad they could finally come to an agreement, and the murderous tension in the room vanished into thin air. But just as they were about to walk into the adjacent conference hall, the doors suddenly flew open with a bang. In rushed a girl dressed in a full bunny suit, holding a drawn sword and looking completely ready for battle. Lumina-sama! I felt a massive surge of energy. Is there an enemy? Before Hinata could even finish her sentence, her eyes scanned the room. With every new legendary face she spotted, her expression grew redder and redder. When her eyes finally landed on Rimuru, who was staring right back at her with wide eyes and a massive blush on his face, Hinata's mind went completely blank. She turned as red as a ripe tomato, spun right on her heel, and sprinted straight out of the throne room. The entire room fell into a stunned, awkward silence as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. A single, completely honest thought popped into Rimuru's mind as he stared at the doorway. Honestly, I think I can die in peace now. The sight of Hinata in a bunny outfit was something he would never, ever forget. Chapter 20, Hell for Bunny-chan. With Hinata's sudden, dramatic appearance, the threat of a brand new conflict loomed over the room. Luminous looked like she was right on the verge of storming off to comfort Hinata, but she thought better of it, deciding against it due to the hostile glares she was still receiving from Rimuru's entourage. Once everyone finally settled down, they moved into the formal meeting room. Hinata was present as well, though her face was still burning bright red. She had definitely noticed the hilarious look Rimuru made when he saw her in that outfit. In fact, two people in the room, one of them being Rain, were actively taking mental notes of his reaction for future blackmail material. Hinata kept her head turned away in sheer embarrassment, inwardly praying for the meeting to end so she could lock herself in her room forever. Seeking to rescue her friend from the awkwardness, Luminous Valentine spoke up to initiate the proceedings. Look, I don't have all day. Tell me exactly what you came here for, she demanded, her usual arrogant demeanor masking her inner panic. She didn't realize that her haughty tone was still annoying a lot of the people in the room. Rain instantly bristled, stepping forward. How dare you speak to our lord with such? Calm down, Rain, Rimuru interrupted smoothly before she could finish. There's no need to get upset. Once Rain sat back down, Rimuru turned to Luminous with a playful, teasing grin. You see, everyone, Luminous here isn't actually as tough as she's acting. She's just doing her best to look intimidating. I mean, think about it. She is sitting in front of two primordial demons, two demon lords, a dragon king, and a true dragon. Of course she has to put on a brave face to keep herself from shaking in her chair, right, Luminous-chan? Rimuru delivered that final line in a perfect, high and mighty imitation of Luminous' own snobby tone. Luminous bolted upright from her chair, her face exploding in a mix of pure anger and embarrassment. But before she could shout a retort, Rain cut her off. Ah, I see, Rain said, smoothly clapping her hands together. So she recognizes the absolute greatness of Rimuru-sama, and she is simply attempting to act dignified in his presence. What incredible insight, Rimuru-sama! Ultima had a bright, joyful expression on her face as well, completely agreeing with the assessment. Meanwhile, Velgrand and Milim were completely ignoring the entire political debate. Milim was far too occupied happily licking off the honey she had received from Rimuru earlier, entirely tuned out. Luminous turned an even deeper shade of red, looking like she was about to completely blow a fuse. Chloe, who had been quiet the whole time, finally decided to speak up to save the meeting. Sensei, stop teasing Luminous. And Luminous, calm down. It's completely unlike you to lose your composure over something like this. She firmly scolded both Rimuru and Luminous at the same time. Rimuru just let out a small chuckle, while Luminous instantly deflated into her seat. To be scolded so strictly by Chloe was pure bliss to her, a thought she barely managed to hide behind a strict poker face. "All right, let's get down to it," Rimuru said, turning completely serious. "We don't have much time to waste, so I'll make this quick. I came here to formally invite you to join the newly reformed Demon Lords." Luminous' eyes widened for a split second before she forced herself to regain her composure. She didn't expect an offer like this at all. She knew all about Guy Crimson and had briefly interacted with him in the past, quickly realizing that her own strength was completely irrelevant in front of his. Furthermore, she had heard rumors about Milim's recent destructive rampages. She couldn't help but wonder if there was some sort of hidden motive behind the invitation. "And what reason do I have to join your little group?" Luminous asked skeptically. "Well, look," Rimuru explained. "Even though the Demon Lords aren't exactly best friends, we still look out for one another when someone is in serious trouble. You can expect full military support in case of an emergency." The offer actually sounded reasonable, but Luminous was still highly skeptical. She could barely hold her own against the primordial demons serving under Rimuru. Why did they want her to become a Demon Lord? "What exactly do you gain from me joining?" Luminous asked, her eyes narrowing. "Me? Nothing really," Rimuru smiled easily. "Just a reliable new colleague." Luminous leaned forward. "Is a decision like this even up to you to make? Isn't Guy Crimson the undisputed leader of the Demon Lords?" "Oh, good question," Rimuru grinned mischievously. "Well, not anymore. We decided that I would be the one to recruit some new members, and you're next on the list." "Next on the list? Who else did you bring in?" "Well, as of right now, just one other person," Rimuru said, his grin widening as he prepared to play his ultimate trump card. He knew exactly how much Luminous absolutely despised De Gruel. De Gruel has already agreed to join us. The reaction was instantaneous. Luminous slammed both hands on the table, completely losing her cool. "That damn overgrown missile head is joining." "Fine. I accept. I'll become a Demon Lord or whatever else it takes." Rimuru shook his head internally, completely amused by the predictable reaction. "I knew mentioning De Gruel would work, but man, does she really hate him that much? I know they eventually make up down the line, but I had no idea the grudge was this bad right now." Velgrind looked on indifferently, commenting dryly, "Well, it seems like this meeting was a total success." "Yep," Rimuru agreed, standing up from his chair. "With that settled, we officially have two brand new Demon Lords." Milim suddenly looked up from her fingers, looking completely startled. "Wait, new Demon Lords? Who is it? Is it not me?" Everyone in the room let out a collective sigh at her incredibly carefree attitude. "We'll talk about it later, Milim. Just keep eating your honey," Rimuru chuckled. Turning back to the girls, he added, "Before I forget, there's one more thing I wanted to bring up. Chloe, Hinata, do you two want to come back with me to Tempest? I can train you for a while. Especially you, Hinata. You're not quite strong enough for the upcoming battles, and you could really use some intense conditioning." Hinata shot a fierce, lethal glare at Rimuru, mostly because of his little slip of the tongue regarding her bunny outfit earlier. But before she could firmly refuse the offer, Chloe eagerly cut in. "We accept, Sensei. I absolutely can't wait to train with you again," Chloe said gleefully. Luminous hissed like an angry cat, instantly sensing that her precious friends were being lured away from her side. "What do you mean, train? We have plenty of highly capable people right here in the Holy Empire to train Hinata. My own guidance should be more than enough." "Luminous, Sensei is incredibly strong," Chloe explained perfectly. "There is literally no one better in the world to train us. I bet he was even the primary cause of that massive earthquake a few days ago." Luminous and Hinata both stared blankly at her statement, completely skeptical, until they noticed the smug, incredibly proud expressions on the faces of everyone else in Rimuru's entourage. Rain and Velgrind looked especially prideful. Luminous' voice trembled slightly. Don't tell me. Indeed, Chloe-san, Rain boasted proudly before Rimuru could tell her to shut up. That earthquake was caused by Rimuru-sama completely knocking out Veldora-sama after slamming him straight into the ground. Luminous' naturally pale vampire skin turned visibly whiter, a look of absolute disbelief washing over her face. Hinata, who had already witnessed Ciel's terrifying analytical wrath in the past, knew exactly what Rimuru's group was capable of, but she was completely shocked nevertheless. Ha ha, yeah. I guess that happened. Rimuru laughed it off nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Anyway, Chloe and Hinata, I'll take that as a definitive yes. Let's get moving. Yes, sensei. We're ready. Chloe smiled. A miserable thought crossed Hinata's mind as she sat there. Why does absolutely nobody ever ask for my opinion? She felt completely defeated. All right, looks like we're all done here, Rimuru said, standing up completely. We have to head back now. I bet Guy is already dying of curiosity to know how everything turned out. I'll send word to you in the next few days regarding when the official Walpurgis meeting will take place, Luminous. Sensei, I need to go pack my luggage first, Chloe mentioned. Oh, don't worry about that, you won't need to pack anything, Rimuru smiled. I have absolutely everything you two could ever need stored away in my inventory. Just hurry up and step close. Chloe and Hinata exchanged a curious glance but decided not to question it. All right, Luminous-chan, see you later. Rimuru grinned, instantly teleporting the three of them right out of the palace. A second later, they materialized in a completely different location. Chloe looked around, completely confused. Wait, are we going somewhere else first, sensei? The reason for her question was obvious, they weren't on the frozen continent at all. They were just a few kilometers outside Luminous Castle in a desolate, empty area. Rimuru was suddenly looking incredibly nervous, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Well, Chloe, Hinata, your training is actually going to start right this second. I need you two to step inside my imaginary space. Hinata narrowed her eyes, instantly becoming deeply suspicious. Your imaginary space? Wait a minute, why aren't you the one training us? Yeah, aren't you coming with us, sensei? Chloe asked. I thought you said you were going to train us yourself. I will. I totally will. Rimuru lied, sweating bullets. I have to go settle a few quick things with Guy first. I'll join you guys right after, I promise. All right, I'll be waiting for you, sensei, Chloe smiled, trusting him completely. Let's go, Hinata. Hinata didn't believe Rimuru for a single second. He looked far too incredibly guilty and suspicious. But before she could voice her protest, Rimuru activated his skill, sending both of them straight into his imaginary space. Right before the spatial transfer finalized, Hinata could clearly hear Rimuru whisper a tiny phrase under his breath. I'll pray for your survival. She had no idea what that meant, but it absolutely terrified her. Back in isolation, Rimuru asked his core skill a worried question. Ciel, are you absolutely sure this is a good idea? There is absolutely no need to worry, Master, Ciel's voice echoed in his mind with an unsettling, icy coldness. I will thoroughly educate. Train Chloe and the little bunny. I will ensure I do not overdo it. Rimuru had a massive, looming premonition of dread about the whole situation, but he didn't dare say a single word to contradict his core skill. He had made a strict deal with Ciel, and sacrificing the girl's sanity was a price he was completely willing to pay for his own peace. I believe in you guys, Chloe, Hinata. Rimuru offered a silent prayer in his mind before instantly teleporting himself and the rest of his entourage back to the Palace of White Ice. Meanwhile, inside the endless void of the imaginary space, Chloe looked around in absolute wonder. Wow, so this is his imaginary space? I can't even see the end of it. The more I learn about that guy, the more ridiculous and broken he becomes, Hinata muttered, though she was still completely amazed by the cosmic view spread out in front of them. Suddenly, a freezing cold voice echoed through the void. A figure identical to Rimuru, but with piercing, glowing red eyes, materialized directly in front of them. The moment Hinata recognized exactly who it was, the color completely drained from her face, replaced by absolute horror. Ciel looked down at them with a chilling, perfectly calculated smile. "Chloe. Bunny-chan. Welcome to your very first training session. Let us see if you are truly worthy." Standing in the void, Hinata genuinely wished she could run straight back to Luminous Castle, even if it meant being forced to try on 100 more ridiculous outfits. But as their absolute nightmare of a training session with Ciel officially began, she knew that was nothing more than wishful thinking. Chapter 21, Ciel-sama. Several days had passed since Rimuru returned from his trip. With their return, the palace became incredibly lively again, and everyone was thoroughly enjoying themselves. Velgrind, who had left shortly after arriving, mentioned that she had to visit her younger brother because she missed him so much. Of course, her menacing smile stated the absolute opposite. Rimuru, who had absolutely no desire to intervene, silently prayed for Veldora's survival. During the last few days, Rimuru and Guy Crimson started hanging out a lot more. Since neither of them actually needed sleep, they stayed up all night long enjoying the new gifts brought back for him in manga. Surprisingly, Guy was really into it. He read a ton and constantly discussed his theories about what was going to happen next with Rimuru. He had successfully been turned into an otaku. But Rimuru didn't do it out of pure generosity. At the beginning, the main reason was Guy's utter outrage after seeing that Ultima had been named and received a physical body. He had whined about the global power balance for several straight hours before Rimuru handed him some manga in the hopes of shutting him up. It worked like an absolute charm. But for the past few days, Ciel had been silent. Like, really silent. Usually, she would make at least a few short comments on daily events, or let out a little hiss if another girl tried to approach Rimuru. But lately, she simply didn't say a word. That wasn't the only problem. For the exact same amount of time that Hinata and Chloe had entered his imaginary space, Ciel had been using a meticulous amount of magicules for some unknown reason. It was enough energy to create several planets. But whenever Rimuru asked about it, she simply evaded the question entirely. "Hey, Rimuru, what's up with that face?" Guy asked, looking somewhat annoyed. "Don't tell me it's because of the manga. I haven't read that volume yet, so stop giving me spoilers with those expressions." "No, it's nothing," Rimuru replied quickly. "I was just thinking about some other things. Nothing really important." "If you say so," Guy answered, shrugging his shoulders in response. Suddenly, another massive wave of magicules was violently sucked right out of Rimuru. That was the final straw. He had officially had enough. "All right, I'll be back soon," Rimuru muttered, standing up. "All right," came Guy's nonchalant response. "Ciel, that's enough." "I'm coming in right now," Rimuru thought. The moment he entered his imaginary space, Rimuru was left completely speechless. He literally could not comprehend the sight in front of him. It was a bizarre mixture of hell and paradise at the exact same time. The imaginary space, or at least a massive portion of it, had been completely divided into two pieces. On one side, stars and meteors were violently raining down from above. It looked like an apocalyptic scene straight out of an extinction event. To throw him even further out of the loop, he discovered a girl right in the middle of this disaster zone, desperately trying to evade the celestial objects raining down on her, slicing them to pieces. This was none other than Chloe. But unexpectedly, the paradise side confused him even more. In the middle of a beautiful, pristine garden, Ciel lay lounging on a remarkably comfy-looking sofa while being served by Hinata, who was dressed in a pristine maid uniform. Hinata stood rigidly next to the couch, holding a bunch of grapes in her hand, carefully feeding Ciel. Did she somehow get her hands on those old documentaries I used to watch about the ancient Romans and Greeks? Rimuru wondered, his jaw practically hitting the floor. What the hell is happening here? His chaotic thoughts were interrupted when Ciel noticed him and waved for him to join her. "Bunny-chan," Ciel said, waving Hinata off. "Master has come to visit us. Greet him with the utmost respect, just like I taught you." "As you wish, Ciel-sama," Hinata said, bowing her head. She then slowly approached Rimuru, her face turning a bright, beating red as she bowed low in front of him. "Welcome, Master. I am deeply honored by your visit. Would you care for something to eat?" Hinata asked, her voice stuttering heavily. "Bunny-chan, why are you stuttering? It seems you still require much more training," Ciel noted in an annoyed tone, though her face remained completely emotionless. Hinata began sweating profusely and quietly accompanied Rimuru to his seat without saying another word, terrified of making another mistake. "Ciel, would you care to explain?" Rimuru asked after finally regaining his composure. "What on earth is going on here? Didn't you say you were going to train them?" "Master, this is training," Ciel answered smoothly. "I realized that our little bunny here severely lacks respect and manners, so I thought I should start by tackling that issue first. Unlike Chloe over there. She kept complaining about the physical regimen, so I had to change her training method slightly." "Slightly? That's a literal apocalypse over there." Rimuru screamed internally. "Rimuru-sama, I am incredibly happy that you are concerned about me, but I am." Hinata started her sentence, pausing as she caught a sharp glance from Ciel that told her exactly how to finish. "I am perfectly happy with the servant training Ciel-sama provides me with." Rimuru, nevertheless, did not look convinced at all. "Are you absolutely sure about that?" "Yes, Rimuru-sama. I am completely fine," Hinata said, though her eyes begged otherwise. "But Ciel, this is—" "Master," Ciel interrupted before Rimuru could finish his thought. "Does this mean our little deal is no longer valid? I thought we had firmly agreed on the terms." Rimuru gulped hard at that. He absolutely did not want to break his deal with Ciel, no matter what. As long as Chloe and Hinata didn't openly oppose their training, he decided he would just let them continue, even though he could clearly see that Hinata was suffering in silence. Defeated, Rimuru let out a heavy sigh and gave up. Chloe, who finally noticed that Rimuru had come to visit, rushed over from the chaotic zone as fast as she could, taking a seat right next to him. "Sensei! Did you come here to visit me? It seems like you missed me already," Chloe asked, her voice dropping into a playful, teasing tone. Oh man, what is going on with her? Ciel is going to burn this entire dimension to the ground if she keeps acting like that. Hasn't she suffered enough from the meteors? Rimuru panicked. But to his absolute surprise, Ciel didn't mind at all. She was simply sitting there, smiling calmly. This left Rimuru even more confused. Well, yes. I mean, no, maybe? I don't know, Rimuru stammered, completely thrown off. Anyway, I just came to check on how your training was proceeding and to see what the reason was for the massive amount of magicules Ciel was drawing. But it looks like that question has been answered. All right, I'm going to head out. Take care. With that, Rimuru quickly escaped, teleporting straight back to the Cardinal World. Sensei, wait! Chloe called out. Once he vanished, she sat down and looked at the floor, sighing. Why is he always running away like that? Ciel-sensei, I did exactly as you said, but it's no use. Why so hasty, Chloe-chan? We aren't in a hurry, are we? Ciel said gently. Take your time, be a good girl, and everything will turn out perfectly fine. Really? I believe in you, Ciel-sensei. Chloe said, jumping up happily to return to her apocalyptic training side. Hinata, meanwhile, was still standing rigidly next to the couch, not daring to say a single word. Bunny-chan, Ciel called out. Yes, Ciel-sama. I've had enough grapes. Peel some oranges for me, will you? Oh, of course, Ciel-sama. Hinata replied instantly. And just like that, the strongest paladin of the Western nations had officially become the personal maid of Ciel. Chapter 22, Envy. A full month had passed since Rimuru visited the imaginary space. Guy Crimson spent most of his days reading manga to pass the time, and Velzad had also taken a strong liking to them, though she exclusively read romance stories. Velgrind had also returned, leaving behind a brutally beaten Veldora. The poor storm dragon hadn't been expecting sudden educational lessons from his older sister out of nowhere. He didn't even get an explanation beforehand. Velgrind had simply appeared before him and started throwing hands without a single word. Only after he lost consciousness did she bother to explain the reason for her rage, meaning Veldora never actually heard it. Even though Velgrind had returned to the Palace of White Ice, she was strangely never seen around the main halls, and nobody knew where she was spending her time. That was until one day, Rimuru decided to check in on his imaginary space again. To his absolute shock, he found Velgrind, Ciel, and Chloe all sitting comfortably around a table, intensely discussing a document while Hinata served them drinks and snacks. The moment they spotted him, they instantly fell silent, acting like they were just casually chatting about everyday topics. Shortly after, Rimuru was unceremoniously thrown out by Ciel, who used the excuse that they needed to continue their training and that he was nothing more than a distraction. The days went on, and everything remained entirely peaceful. That was until Rimuru suddenly remembered a major promise he had made. He had promised to Gruel and Luminous that they would host a formal Demon Lord banquet to officially welcome them to their ranks. He stood up from his bed and instantly teleported over to Guy, who was currently lying face down on the couch. "Guy, we need to host a Walpurgis for the new Demon Lords," Rimuru announced. Guy, who was far too busy reading, didn't even look up from his manga. Keeping his eyes glued to the pages, he asked, "Walpurgis? What on earth is that?" "Oh, I just thought simply calling it a Demon Lords meeting sounded incredibly boring. That's why I came up with a cooler name for it." "Well, it doesn't sound bad." "Sure, why not?" Guy muttered. "Man, you've gotten seriously lazy, haven't you?" Rimuru said, letting out a heavy sigh. Part of him deeply regretted introducing Guy to the world of manga. The once intimidating Dark Emperor had turned into a complete slacker, leaving Rimuru with all the administrative work, even though Rain and Misery did almost everything else. "Shut up," Guy grumbled. "If that's everything important you have to say, leave me alone. Go have Misery help you if you need anything." Rimuru let out another sigh and left the room to check up on another resident of the palace. Velzad was currently in her room, lying face down on her bed with several books spread out across the floor. She didn't even move when she heard a knock on the door. Guy and the other demons knew better than to disturb her in her room, so she knew it had to be Rimuru. Milim would have simply smashed the door down, and Velgrind wouldn't have bothered to knock at all. Rimuru knocked again and heard a muffled, "Come on in," from inside. He opened the door and looked around. "Wow, you sure are messy these days, Velzad. Just look at your room. I like it this way." "Don't bother me about it," she sighed. "What do you want?" "Ouch, that hurts, you know," Rimuru said, wiping away a fake tear. "And here I thought I could visit you and maybe give you some helpful advice." "Advice? What kind of advice?" Velzad asked, her curiosity piqued. "Well, I noticed you've been reading all that romance stuff lately," Rimuru said with a smug expression. "So I thought I could help you out a bit when it comes to a certain red demon." He was fully expecting a cheerful response or an excited Velzad eagerly accepting his proposal. Instead, the temperature in the room dropped dramatically, freezing the air instantly. Velzad was glaring directly at him with a terrifying, menacing smile. "Velzad, did I say something wrong?" Rimuru asked, instantly panicking. "Wrong? Wrong. Who do you think I am?" Velzad shouted, her voice echoing with power. "What are you thinking, trying to pair me up with that idiot demon? Get out of here before I decide to punish you for your insolence." Rimuru didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled out of the room as fast as his legs could carry him. "What the hell was that about?" Rimuru thought, completely baffled. Back in Tempest, she always came to me complaining about how dense Guy was. That definitely wasn't a Tsunda reaction in there. She was genuinely furious. It was completely different from usual. Master, Ciel's voice finally chimed in. Ciel! You finally decided to talk again. What was that all about? Why did she freak out like that? I have two theories, although I am not entirely sure how accurate they are. Do you wish to hear them? Yes, go ahead. My first guess would be that Velzad simply does not understand romantic love, setting aside the familiar bond that the true dragons share. Furthermore, she may be far too proud to admit that she has feelings for a member of a demon race. That actually makes a lot of sense, knowing how proud and stubborn Velzad can be, Rimuru agreed. What about the second theory? You are aware of how ultimate skills manifest from the soul of an individual, correct? Do you remember Velzad's core skill? Yeah, Patience King Gabriel, right? But what does that have to do with her relationship with Guy? Before she acquired that specific skill, she possessed a unique skill called Envy. In the original timeline, that skill eventually evolved into the Sin Sapphire skill, Envious King Leviathan. Do you see the connection now? Rimuru thought about it for a moment. Wait. Guy is constantly chasing after Leon. He's always making shameless advances on him. Hold on a minute, don't tell me. Yes, exactly, Ciel confirmed. I believe that after realizing Guy Crimson was paying so much attention to Leon Cromwell, Velzad became deeply envious, and that envy is what twisted into her current feelings. Essentially, her love was born out of jealousy toward Leon. Wow, that is incredibly complicated, Rimuru muttered out loud, completely dumbfounded by Ciel's analysis. Here he thought he could play matchmaker and help Guy and Velzad bond, but it looked like he would have to wait for Leon to officially take his Demon Lord seat before any of this got resolved. True dragons really are bizarre. Once the matter with Velzad settled down, Rimuru remembered he still had to inform everyone about the upcoming Walpurgis. With a thought, Rain and Ultima appeared directly in front of him, kneeling instantly to await their orders. How many times do I have to tell you guys that you don't need to kneel every single time I call for you? Rimuru sighed. Well, whatever. You two need to go out and inform the other demon lords that we will be hosting a Walpurgis tomorrow, and that I expect them to appear no matter what. But do not cause any problems like you did last time. Simply deliver the message and return immediately. As you wish, Rimuru-sama, Rain and Ultima said in perfect unison before vanishing. Next, Misery appeared before Rimuru. Unlike Rain, she didn't kneel, she simply bowed gracefully, showing that she actually listened to Rimuru's instructions. You called for me, Rimuru-sama. Yes, Misery. I need you to help me prepare the venue for the Walpurgis tomorrow. Follow me. Misery nodded silently and followed closely behind him. So tomorrow is the big day, huh? Let's see how this whole thing turns out, Rimuru thought to himself, officially kicking off the preparations for the very first Walpurgis. Chapter 23, You Did What? Luminous Valentine was currently sitting in her private chambers, feeling simultaneously bored and absolutely furious. It had been an entire month since Rimuru came to her palace and took away her two absolute favorites, Chloe and Hinata. What hurt even worse was that it wasn't even by force, both of them had willingly chosen to follow him. This deeply wounded Luminous' pride. She hadn't spoken to a single soul since that day, threatening to execute anyone who dared disturb her. Adhering strictly to her orders, neither Gunther, Roy, nor Louis had dared to knock on her door, though they were all deeply concerned for their vampire queen. Luminous lay motionless on her bed, her face buried deep in her pillows. I knew Chloe had a massive thing for him, but even Hinata? No, it doesn't matter. One day, I will completely destroy you for touching what belongs to me, you lowly demon lord. I swear it on my name. As she was aggressively plotting her revenge, a loud commotion erupted right outside her door. She could hear Gunther, Louis, and Roy intensely arguing with someone, or rather, shouting at the top of their lungs. This, of course, irritated her immensely. Didn't I explicitly tell them not to disturb me? Maybe I should just kill and revive them on the spot to teach those morons a proper lesson. I already told you, our queen explicitly stated that no one is to bother her under any circumstances. So leave immediately before we are forced to, Gunther started, but he was cut off by a high-pitched, mischievous giggle. Hee hee. You seem to have grown quite a backbone since we last met, you old leech, Ultima taunted, giving Gunther her absolute cutest smile. Does that mean you want to go another round? Just so you know, I don't plan on holding back this time. I will 100% kill you. To Gunther, that smile wasn't cute at all. It was terrifying. He tried his best to hide his emotions, but deep down, he knew her threat was entirely real. Still, the Queen's orders were absolute. Even if he died, he trusted that Luminous would simply revive him using her secret arts. Oh, just so you know, you can't be revived if you fight me this time, Ultima added cheerfully. How can someone be brought back to life if their soul is completely shattered into dust? All three vampires turned completely pale upon hearing that. How on earth did this demon know the exact mechanics of their queen's ultimate ability? This was actually all Rimuru's fault. After their disastrous first meeting with Luminous, he had accidentally slipped details about her resurrection abilities to calm the demons down. They had been incredibly depressed over failing their master, so Rimuru had tried to comfort them by saying that even if they had accidentally killed the vampires, Luminous could have easily brought them back as long as their souls were intact. While Rain fully understood what Rimuru meant, Ultima had completely misunderstood it in the worst way possible. She took it as, if you're going to kill them, shatter their souls so Luminous can't mess up Master's plans. Because she never voiced this thought out loud, Rimuru had no idea. If he were here right now, he would have scolded her into oblivion, but unfortunately, he wasn't there to correct the mistake. Listen, Primordial, Roy said sternly, his short temper flaring. Go back to your lord and tell him that our queen is not accepting visitors. Come back another time through the proper diplomatic channels, not by randomly teleporting into the middle of the throne room. First of all, my name is Ultima. I received it directly from my lord, so I would highly appreciate it if you used it, Ultima said, her voice dropping into a dangerous register. Secondly, if your queen doesn't listen to me right now, she is going to miss something incredibly important and will be severely punished for it. I'm certain Gai-sama and Rimuru-sama would be highly displeased. Rain just messaged me saying De Gruel listened to his summons instantly, so. Don't you dare threaten us, you violent brat. Before Roy could even finish his sentence, a massive shockwave sent him flying backwards. He burst straight through Luminous reinforced bedroom doors, crashing violently into the far wall, barely missing Luminous herself. I told you to use my name, didn't I? Ultima said, casually stepping through the shattered doorway. My next attack won't leave you alive. Just like my master, I decided to act mercifully today, so you should be thoroughly grateful. You again? Luminous shouted, bolting upright from her bed. What do you want this time? Wasn't taking Chloe and Hinata enough for you people? Oh, if it isn't Luminous Valentine, crying all alone in her bed, Ultima mocked playfully. I simply came to inform you that there will be a Walpurgis meeting tomorrow. Be ready. We will come by to pick you up when it's time. Without waiting for a response, Ultima turned on her heel and instantly teleported back to the frozen continent. Walpurgis? What on earth is that? Wait, what time? Luminous shouted at the empty air, completely frustrated. That brat always manages to completely infuriate me. But wait, if it's a meeting of all the demon lords, maybe I can finally see Hinata and Chloe again. Luminous immediately turned to her remaining subordinates. Gunther, Louis, prepare for my departure tomorrow. I don't know exactly when they will arrive, but we must be fully ready. As you wish, my queen, Gunther and Louis replied in unison, bowing low. Luminous then walked over to the severely injured Roy to begin healing his broken bones. Meanwhile, back at the banquet venue, Rimuru turned to his assistant. What do you think, Misery? How does it look? Misery looked around, completely astonished by the breathtaking view in front of her. As expected of Rimuru-sama. This space is truly worthy of hosting a Walpurgis. Rimuru had thought the old, traditional pocket dimensions used for these meetings looked incredibly boring, dark, and gloomy, so he had completely remodeled this one. Now, it was a stunning, sprawling garden filled with all sorts of exotic flowers, a massive golden fountain, and even several wild dragons flying peacefully around the upper atmosphere. A high-level barrier was placed around the grand round table in the center of the garden, ensuring the wildlife wouldn't disrupt their tea. Rimuru was incredibly proud of his handiwork. He had gone completely out of his way to capture those dragons and drag them here just for the aesthetic. Hopefully, this Walpurgis won't be completely dry and depressing like the old ones, Rimuru thought. He wanted an environment where they could actually welcome Luminous and DeGruel properly, enjoy some premium tea, and just chat about casual topics. Don't say a single word about this to Guy or the others, Misery. I want it to be a massive surprise for them, got it? As you wish, Rimuru-sama, Misery replied, though she stuttered slightly. Even though she knew Rimuru just wanted to surprise everyone, it felt slightly wrong to keep a secret from her primary master, Guy. But because it was Rimuru asking, she was perfectly willing to go along with it. All right then, let's head back to the palace. I'm sure Rain and Ultima have returned by now. With that, they teleported back to the Palace of White Ice, where Rimuru was immediately hit with some shocking news. She did what? Rimuru screamed internally. He had fully anticipated that Ultima might be a little rude to the vampires, but he didn't think she would literally blast through Luminous' bedroom door. Ultima, Rimuru said, staring her down. Ultima looked up at him with massive, watery puppy eyes. Yes, Rimuru-sama. I explicitly told you not to pick any fights. This is the second time you've visited them, and the second time you've caused a disaster. But Rimuru-sama, I didn't actually kill them. She whined. That doesn't make it any better. This entire event is supposed to be a welcoming party for them. You can't just go around attacking our guests whenever they get a little rude with you. Go straight to the punishment corner and reflect on your actions. As you wish, my lord, Ultima said, her voice on the verge of tears as she walked over to the designated timeout corner. She faced the wall, sulking heavily as she began her punishment. Man, what am I going to do with her? Rimuru thought, rubbing his temples. How on earth does Diolo manage to keep these primordials so perfectly well behaved? Honestly, my respect for that guy has skyrocketed. Maybe I should call him over? No, it's way too early for that. He hasn't even started stalking me yet. I'll wait until he naturally discovers me. Rimuru-sama? Rain asked, looking deeply concerned. Ah, sorry. I was just lost in thought, Rimuru laughed nervously. Because of all the sudden stress, he had completely forgotten to activate his thought acceleration skill, leaving him staring blankly into the abyss for several minutes while everyone watched in confusion. Anyway, let's head over to the kitchen, Rimuru announced, changing the subject. I'm going to teach you guys some brand new recipes for tomorrow's banquet. Both Rain and Misery instantly flashed bright, joyful smiles. In the corner, Ultima could be heard crying quietly because she was missing out on a rare opportunity to cook alongside her lord. Rimuru sighed. All right, Ultima, you can join us too. But absolutely no more fighting in the future, okay? Yes, of course, Rimuru-sama. Ultima cheered, her eyes instantly lighting up with stars. See? This is exactly why they behave the way they do. You spoil them far too much, Master, Ciel chided in his mind. Hey, I do not. Rimuru pouted. Regardless, you will not change that habit of yours, Ciel countered. To answer your earlier question regarding their behavior, our absolute best hope is for Diolo to properly discipline them in the future. Rimuru pouted at Ciel's complete lack of faith in his parenting skills, but he quickly shrugged it off and headed into the kitchen to prepare the feast for the upcoming banquet. Chapter 24, The Newbie. The big day had finally arrived. Rimuru was currently sitting at the Grand Round Table, thoroughly enjoying the peaceful final moments before the rest of the Demon Lords arrived. He was joined by Rain and Ultima, who were completely mesmerized by the sheer beauty of the garden venue. To Rimuru, watching them walk around praising every single flower and pebble felt exactly like having two copies of Diablo running around. Fortunately, he had long since grown used to that level of intense worship. Still, he was pleasantly surprised by Ultima. He hadn't expected her to be into beautiful landscapes, considering her favorite spot back in Tempest was usually the dark underground prison where she interrogated captives. Apparently, gloomy dungeons weren't her only interest. Testarossa and Carrere would absolutely love this place, Rimuru thought to himself. Testarossa always enjoys having high-class tea in beautiful areas, and surprisingly, Carrere took a massive liking to gardening, which completely contrasts her explosive personality. I'll definitely show them this place once they officially join us. I wonder how Luminous, De Gruel, and Guy are going to react. Rain, Ultima, it's time, Rimuru commanded. Go pick up the others. Bring Guy out first. As you wish, Rimuru-sama, they answered in unison. Rain stepped forward and opened the classic Walpurgis portal, which looked completely ominous and totally clashed with the beautiful garden aesthetic. The moment Guy Crimson stepped through the portal, his jaw dropped. What the hell is this, Rimuru? Isn't this supposed to be a serious Demon Lords meeting? You even picked an incredibly dark and ominous name like Walpurgis, and then you turn the venue into a literal tropical paradise? Where on earth is the dark, imposing theme? Guy complained loudly. A prominent tick mark popped up on Rimuru's forehead. It took every single ounce of his willpower not to smash Guy's head directly into the table. He took a few deep, rhythmic breathing exercises, despite not actually needing to breathe at all, to force himself to calm down. While I was busy running around preparing absolutely everything for this event, you were lazing around on the couch like a professional slacker doing absolutely nothing helpful, Rimuru snapped. So shut up, stop complaining, and take your seat. TCH. I'm not a slacker. I just enjoy relaxing from time to time, Guy muttered defensively, pulling out his chair. Whatever. Where are the others? I figured it would be best to have them bring you out first. It would look pretty weird if the coordinator wasn't present when the guests arrived, wouldn't it? Well, true, Guy admitted, leaning back. Do you think it was a good idea to send Ultima, though? Rain is perfectly well-mannered, but Ultima. Why do you have to bring that up right now? You're literally raising flags, Rimuru groaned. I'm sure it'll be fine. Though deep down inside, he highly doubted that last part. Right on cue, the spatial doors swung open. Ultima and Rain walked through, accompanied by De Gruel, Ramiris, and Milim. While De Gruel looked incredibly impressed by the scenery, Ramiris was practically vibrating with pure excitement. This kind of lush, vibrant environment perfectly suited her status as the Queen of Spirits. Rimuru! You completely overdid yourself again. This place is absolutely beautiful. Ramiris cheered, flying around in circles. You even have high-tier spirits here maintaining the entire landscape. Suddenly, her excited rambling cut short, and a look of profound confusion washed over her face. Everyone at the table turned to look at her, wondering what was wrong. Ramiris's face grew visibly paler by the second as she stared intently at the spirits working in the garden, and then back at Rimuru. Rimuru, what on earth is going on here? Ramiris whispered. What do you mean? Those spirits, they aren't, well, they were never bonded to me, Ramiris said, her voice trembling. They look like entirely newborn, independent spirits completely disconnected from my labyrinth. Don't tell me you actually. Well, let's definitely talk about that later, shall we, Ramiris? Rimuru interrupted loudly, completely panicking. It's incredibly rude to keep our guests waiting, right? He frantically cut her off before she could accidentally spill the beans to everyone else. Ramiris shot him a highly suspicious glare but wisely chose to take her seat at the table. De Gruel sat down shortly after, looking thoroughly relaxed. Finally, a thoroughly grumpy-looking Luminous Valentine arrived, flanked by Gunther and Louis. She walked straight to her designated seat without greeting a single soul, radiating pure irritation. Guy raised an eyebrow at her incredibly rude entrance but decided to let it slide since everyone was finally present. He rose from his chair to initiate the proceedings. "Welcome to your very first Walpurgis, De Gruel and Luminous Valentine," Guy announced. "Normally, we would start this meeting by having you duel one of the current demon lords to formally prove your strength. However, since Rimuru personally invited you both, it means he deems you worthy. We don't need to discuss your respective domains, as you both already rule over your territories. What's left is granting your official titles, which Rimuru will handle, followed by the banquet." Why on earth is this guy rushing through everything at hypersonic speed? Rimuru thought, completely stunned. He literally just concluded the entire formal Walpurgis in less than 60 seconds. Then, the sudden realization dawned on him. Don't tell me he's rushing through the official business just so he can hurry back to the palace and continue reading his manga. That complete bastard. The tick mark on Rimuru's forehead grew even larger, but he managed to regain his composure, silently promising himself to properly re-educate the red demon later tonight. "Rimuru will now grant your titles." "Go ahead, Rimuru," Guy concluded, casually sitting back down. "Right. Well, first of all, I officially welcome you both to our ranks," Rimuru said, standing up. "I truly hope we all get along. As you know, coming up with titles can be a real pain. To prevent humans from giving you incredibly boring names, I decided to come up with some awesome titles myself." Luminous looked completely indifferent, but De Gruel seemed genuinely excited about the prospect. "Hey! I want a new title too!" Milim suddenly piped up, slamming her hands on the table. "Milim, you already have a title! The Destroyer! Did you seriously forget your own title already?" Ramiris scolded. Embarrassed and blushing, Milim quietly sat back down. "First up, De Gruel," Rimuru announced. "I've heard stories about your ancient rampages back when Veldanava was still alive. They say your power literally shook the entire continent. Therefore, your official title shall be Earthquake." De Gruel looked incredibly proud at the praise, especially coming from someone as remarkably strong as Rimuru. He gave a respectful nod of thanks and sat back down. "Luminous Valentine," Rimuru continued, turning to the Vampire Queen. "As our newest member, you still have a lot to prove to the rest of the world. I know you're strong, but you need to earn an epic title through future feats. Until then, your official title shall be Newbie." Rimuru had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from bursting out into a massive giggle. He had absolutely zero intention of changing that title anytime soon. Back when he was the newcomer, everyone used to tease him constantly without ever using his real name. Now, it was finally his turn to pass on the tradition. Revenge is a dish best served ice cold, Rimuru thought smugly. Deep inside his mind, he could practically feel Ciel letting out a disappointed sigh. As usual, she knew there was absolutely no way to stop her master from pulling childish pranks from time to time. While Rimuru managed to keep a completely straight face, De Gruel failed miserably. He burst out into a loud, booming laugh, thoroughly enjoying the sheer comedy of the situation. "Newbie? What kind of absolute garbage title is that?" Luminous shouted, her face turning red with fury. "I demand a—" "Quiet," Guy interrupted flatly, much to Rimuru's surprise. "I don't have time for this drama. Rimuru is completely right, you need to earn your title. Now that the official business is concluded, let's proceed straight to the banquet." Even though Rimuru knew exactly why Guy was intervening, to speed up the meeting for his manga, he was still incredibly grateful for the backup. Luminous, completely shut down by Guy, sank back into her chair looking even more grumpy than before. She scanned the area and grumbled under her breath. "Where on earth are Chloe and Hinata? I would much rather visit them than participate in this ridiculous banquet." Rimuru caught her gaze and hesitated. He remembered that Chloe and Hinata were currently trapped inside his imaginary space alongside Ciel and Velgrind. Sending her in there felt like a terrible idea. But just as he was about to deny her request, Ciel suddenly interrupted him internally. "Master, send her in. It is not a problem at all." "Are you absolutely sure about that? Won't she immediately find out about your true identity? It will not harm us in any way. Furthermore, I will ensure that she remains completely quiet about everything she witnesses." Rimuru shuddered slightly at that phrasing. Whenever Ciel ensured something went according to her will, it usually involved some form of psychological trauma. "All right, Luminous. I can send you to see them, but don't stay for too long," Rimuru said out loud. "Wait, send me where?" Before she could even finish her question, Rimuru snapped his fingers, and Luminous was instantly sucked into the imaginary space. The banquet lasted for a full 2 hours, and everyone absolutely loved the food. Milim, in particular, looked exactly like a hamster, completely stuffing both of her cheeks with every single dish available. Throughout the entire dinner, Rimuru could feel Ciel drawing an enormous, staggering amount of magicules once again. He quickly shrugged it off, assuming Chloe was just performing some heavy training exercises. Oh, how incredibly wrong he was. When the 2 hours were up, Rimuru opened a portal to let Luminous back out. The moment she stepped back into the garden, Rimuru's absolute worst fears were realized. Luminous looked completely horrified. She was trembling from head to toe, looking exactly like someone who had just come face to face with a primeval, cosmic horror. Connecting her traumatized expression with the massive magicule consumption from earlier, Rimuru immediately realized what had happened. "Ciel, did you really have to do that to her?" "It was an absolute tactical necessity, Master," Ciel replied smoothly, without a single hint of remorse. Although he desperately wanted to question her further, Rimuru completely gave up. It was simply impossible to win an argument against his core skill. Exhausted and completely exasperated, Rimuru politely saw the rest of the demon lords off, closing the portals before slumping heavily back into his chair. Man! Wasn't this whole thing supposed to be a peaceful, relaxing get-together? Rimuru thought, staring up at the artificial sky as the first ever Walpurgis finally came to an end. Chapter 25, The Little Sheep and the Mediator. The Cardinal World was filled with all sorts of creatures, ranging from weak goblins and rabbitmen to the mighty true dragons. There was one universal rule that shaped everyone's life, a rule that even young children knew by heart: the survival of the fittest. Every monster fought for themselves. Some warrior races, like the ogres, banded together in small villages to defend their territory, but they never complained about their harsh reality. They lived for the thrill of combat and the immense honor that came with a glorious death on the battlefield. The humans, on the other hand, weren't nearly as eager to fight. They typically engaged in warfare only out of sheer greed, or if there was a massive fortune to be plundered. Yet, a few special individuals never had to worry about their existence: the true dragons, the primordial demons, and the powerful magin who had successfully completed their evolution into awakened demon lords. They were simply too powerful to be challenged. If anyone was foolish enough to cross them, these absolute beings could wipe their enemies from existence in the blink of an eye. Luminous Valentine, the vampire queen created by the divine ancestor and an awakened demon lord, had honestly never experienced true fear. She knew exactly how strong she was. She didn't even have to worry about the safety of her subordinates, since she could easily resurrect them, provided she was nearby when they fell. She was well aware that entities like the true dragons and the primordials existed, particularly Guy Crimson, but they weren't the type to launch random attacks without a reason. For the longest time, she believed that de Gruul was her only real source of stress. When she was first invited to join the Demon Lords, she had felt a secret wave of excitement and pride, despite keeping her expression completely stoic. Her supreme strength was finally being acknowledged by the pinnacle of the world. But when she actually arrived at the pocket dimension where Walpurgis was being held, her jaw nearly hit the floor. The venue was an absolute paradise. Of course, she was far too proud to admit it out loud, especially since she knew her romantic rival, Rimuru, was the one responsible for creating it. Once she took her seat, the Walpurgis officially began. Guy Crimson seemed to be in a massive hurry, rapidly blazing through every important topic before casually announcing that Rimuru would be the one granting the new members their titles. The Queen of Nightmares would be a fine title, Luminous thought to herself. She had heard that some humans referred to her by that name, and she didn't particularly dislike it. But when Rimuru boldly announced that her official title would be the Newbie, she was instantly filled with unbridled rage. Never in her entire life had she been so thoroughly insulted. To her immense frustration, Guy completely approved of the ridiculous title, throwing Luminous a cold, warning glare that instantly forced her to shut her mouth. She knew absolutely nothing good would come from starting a massive brawl in this place. Swallowing her immense pride, she sank back into her chair. The insult completely ruined her appetite. Even though the gourmet dishes looked absolutely fabulous, she had far more pressing matters on her mind. She stood up from the table and demanded to see Chloe and Hinata. She had no idea if they were being treated well and wanted to check on them personally, hoping she might even persuade them to return home to the Holy Empire of Lubelius. Although he hesitated at first, Rimuru eventually relented and used his spatial magic to transfer her away. Or at least, that's what Luminous initially thought it was. It didn't feel like a standard teleportation at all, rather, it felt like her entire being was being violently sucked into a void. It was an incredibly bizarre sensation, and she was relieved when she finally arrived at her destination. But looking back, where exactly had everything gone so wrong? All she had wanted to do was vent a little bit of her frustration at that lovable slime who did nothing but annoy her. Even though 2 full weeks had passed since that day, Luminous still hadn't left her private chambers. She remained completely buried beneath her bedsheets, shivering uncontrollably. Whenever she closed her eyes to visualize what had happened in that pocket dimension, those piercing red eyes still seemed to follow her into the dark. It was the exact moment she stared into them that she realized just how completely insignificant her existence truly was. She hadn't been able to move. She hadn't been able to utter a single sound. She had been completely petrified, standing there like a helpless little sheep waiting for its predator to hunt it down. After miraculously escaping that realm alive, she made herself an absolute vow she would never, under any circumstances, threaten or insult Rimuru ever again. Back in the real world, Rimuru suddenly let out a loud sneeze. Ayore? Rimuru, I didn't think it was possible for a spiritual life form like you to catch a cold, Velzad noted, looking up from her book. I can't, Rimuru replied, rubbing his nose. I think someone out there must be intensely thinking about me right now. He simply shrugged the feeling off. Velgrin scoffed, looking over at her sister. Sister, I think his sneezing is actually caused by your incredibly unpleasant, freezing aura. Perhaps it would be best if you left the room entirely so you don't bother us with your presence. What do you say? My, Vel grinned. Velzad smiled, though her eyes were dangerously sharp. Since when does Rimuru belong to you? He happens to be an excellent listener, and I quite enjoy talking to him. So, you're actually the one who shouldn't be bothering us. Oh, is that why he looks so incredibly happy whenever we leave the frozen continent? Velgrin taunted with a smug expression. It seems you bore him so intensely with your endless romance stories that he can't wait to escape your company. In fact, Guy told me Rimuru was unusually cheerful during the Walpurgis. It must have been a wonderful feeling for him to get away from you, even if it was only for a short amount of time. What on earth are you talking about? Velzad countered, her composure beginning to crack. While he was hosting the Walpurgis, I was spending time in a magnificent realm that you couldn't even begin to dream of visiting. Oh? What kind of place? Velgrind asked, instantly intrigued. Did Rimuru not tell you about it? Of course he didn't. That realm is far too pristine and beautiful to be corrupted by your chaotic presence, Velzad continued, deliberately turning the tables. Velgrin stood up abruptly, her massive aura flaring. It seems Veldora isn't the only stupid sibling I need to properly discipline around here. Perhaps I can knock some actual sense into you if we start right now. You think so? Velzad challenged, stepping off her bed as her own massive energy filled the room. Today, I am going to remind you exactly who the older sister is. Perhaps you'll be reborn with a slightly less arrogant personality once I am entirely done with you. Velgrind summoned her signature burning lance, completely ready for a catastrophic clash. But just as the two true dragons were about to unleash a devastating battle that would likely level the entire palace, Rimuru calmly stood up and walked directly between them. Rimuru, get out of the way! I need to teach this little brat some proper manners. Velzad shouted. Yes, Rimuru, move! I need to beat this arrogant nature right out of her. Velgrind echoed, refusing to be outdone. Despite their massive, overlapping pressure, Rimuru stood completely unfazed, glaring coldly at both of them before speaking in an absolute tone. No cakes, no sweets, and absolutely no books or entertainment of any kind for 2 full weeks for you, Velzad. Wait, what? Velzad gasped, looking completely devastated as her aura vanished instantly. Huh? That's exactly what you get. Velgrind triumphed loudly. But she silenced herself the moment Rimuru snapped his gaze over to her. And for you, Velgrind, you are completely banned from visiting the imaginary space for the exact same duration. This time, it was Velgrind's turn to look utterly crushed. The two powerful true dragons looked at each other, instantly put their weapons away, and turned back to Rimuru with massive, trembling puppy eyes, begging for mercy. We were just joking, Rimuru. Seriously. Velzad pleaded. Yeah. You can't just take away my special lessons like that. Velgrind complained. But the moment the word slipped out of her mouth, she quickly clapped her hands over her lips. Rimuru raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. Lessons? What kind of lessons are you taking inside my space? Nothing. Forget I said anything. Velgrind stammered quickly. The two sisters continued to apologize profusely. In the end, Rimuru simply couldn't withstand the combined force of their puppy eyes, and he lowered their punishment to a mere 3 days. You are far too soft, Master, Ciel chided in his mind. Next time, I highly recommend you do not budge an inch. I promise I'll hold the line next time, Rimuru thought back. But Ciel, who knew Rimuru better than anyone else in existence, knew entirely well that he would fold again the moment they looked sad. The primary reason Rimuru was stuck mediating between Velzad and Velgrind was because of Guy. Once it was decided that Velgrind would permanently reside at the palace, Guy had explicitly dumped the responsibility onto Rimuru, declaring him the official mediator between the two volatile dragon sisters to keep them from accidentally vaporizing the fortress. At first, Rimuru didn't think it would be a lot of work, but Velzad and Velgrind acted exactly like a cat and a mouse, constantly fighting all over the halls. He had to rely on small but highly effective disciplinary actions to keep the peace. Suddenly, Guy's voice echoed directly into Rimuru's mind via thought communication. Hey, Rimuru. I've got some interesting news for you. Ooh? What is it, Guy? We have a rather unique visitor who wants to officially join our ranks. Aren't you the primary leader of the Demon Lords, Guy? Just handle it yourself and do whatever you want, Rimuru sighed. Trust me, he's an incredibly fascinating fellow. I think you'll want to see this, Guy chuckled. Fine. Just how interesting are we talking here? How does a fallen angel sound to you? Rimuru immediately severed the thought communication and stood up from his chair. All right, I'm on my way. It looks like our resident lazy sleepyhead has finally arrived. Chapter 26, The Double Agent. The angels originally created by Veldanava completely lacked an ego. They were nothing more than entirely obedient, mindless servants. However, the higher-ranking angels known as the Seraphim eventually posed a rare exception to this rule. Over an immense period of time, they gradually developed a unique ego and a distinct will of their own. Dino was one of those select seraphim. He had been explicitly tasked by Veldanava to act as a celestial overseer, watching over the development of the Cardinal World. Descending to the earth, he began his long journey alongside his two close angelic friends, Pyko and Gracia. Over time, his weak ego grew remarkably strong, and he found himself completely fascinated by the vibrant world his creator had forged. At first, the three of them blended seamlessly among the human populations, learning their complex habits and exploring their diverse cultures. Pico and Gracia were particularly fond of the gourmet delicacies they encountered, adapting to the mortal world incredibly fast. Dino, although he found the world fascinating, honestly preferred staying directly by Veldanava's side. The Seraphim had noticed that Veldanava had lost a massive portion of his divine power over the last few millennia. Following the birth of his daughter, Milim, Veldanava's power levels had dropped to the point where he was comparable to a regular human being. Deep down inside, Dino feared for the safety of his creator, but he constantly reassured himself that absolutely no mortal would ever dare harm God. Unfortunately, he was proven entirely wrong. Veldanava and his wife, Lucia, were brutally assassinated by the very same humans they had spent their lives loving and protecting. Overflowing with unadulterated rage and hatred, Dino instantly flew toward the human nation responsible for the slaughter. Floating high up in the atmosphere, he looked down at the sprawling city in absolute disgust before completely erasing the entire kingdom from the face of the earth with a single attack. Every single human within those borders, innocent or guilty, was instantly slain. This catastrophic act of wrath triggered his official fall from grace, transforming him into a fallen angel. The kingdom was entirely gone, but Dino didn't feel a single shred of satisfaction. Sinking into a deep, agonizing depression, he completely abandoned his sacred duties as an overseer, spending consecutive centuries frozen in sorrow. This prolonged grief eventually caused him to become incredibly lazy, using sleep as an escape from reality. Many years passed with absolutely no change, until one day, Feldway managed to contact him. Dino received a brand new directive. He was ordered to infiltrate the demon lords under Guy Crimson, gather critical intelligence, and systematically tear their alliance apart from the inside when the time was right. Although Dino desperately wanted to know the ultimate purpose of messing with Guy Crimson, who had also been appointed as a mediator by Veldanava, he knew Feldway far too well to press for answers. He knew trying to force information out of him was entirely futile, so he simply accepted the mission. If I remember correctly, Guy should currently be residing in the frozen continent alongside Velzad Sama, Dino thought as he traveled. But how on earth am I going to convince him to let me join? Guy Crimson isn't a fool. He isn't just going to let a random angel join his inner circle. In between his frequent naps, Dino desperately pondered a way to get accepted into their ranks. He even consulted Pico and Gracia, who managed to brainstorm a simple but passable plan. Why don't you just tell him that you have absolutely nowhere else to go? Pico suggested. Claiming that you're just looking for a safe shelter sounds entirely believable for a fallen angel, right? Gracia nodded in firm agreement. Exactly. Keep it simple. Dino groaned. Wow, thanks. When you put it like that, it makes me sound like an absolute beggar. Do you have a better idea? Gracia asked, crossing her arms. No, Dino admitted, knowing it was their best shot. Perfect. Just make sure you don't accidentally fall asleep in the middle of your meeting, Pico warned, looking thoroughly annoyed as Dino's eyelids began to flutter again. Gracia promptly punched him hard in the stomach to wake him up, forcing him to get moving and get the meeting over with. With that, Dino made his way across the frozen wastes to meet the absolute leader of the demon lords. Just so I'm understanding this entirely correctly, a fallen angel randomly wants to join our alliance? Guy Crimson asked, staring down at Dino with a highly skeptical expression. Yes, Guy-san, Dino replied, trying to look as innocent as possible. And what exactly is your reasoning for this sudden request? Well, you see, after Veldanava Sama's tragic passing, I completely annihilated the kingdom responsible for his death. Since then, I've been entirely lost. I fell from grace, and I have absolutely no home left to return to. Although the story sounded incredibly suspicious, Guy sat back and pondered the offer. To him, accepting Dino meant gaining another powerful pawn to play with on the global chessboard, and a remarkably strong one at that. However, he also knew that if he officially accepted a rogue entity into their ranks without consulting Rimuru first, he would face terrifying consequences later. Guy used to think Velzad was the scariest being alive when she lost her temper. But during his stay at the Palace of White Ice, he had quickly learned that an enraged Rimuru was terrifying enough to scare both Velzad and Velgrin simultaneously. Even Guy felt a cold sweat whenever Rimuru truly lost his patience. Acting quickly, Guy opened a private thought communication to update Rimuru about Dino's arrival. "All right, I'm on my way," Rimuru messaged back. "Let's see if you can actually convince him, Dino," Guy thought, a dangerous, amused smile playing on his lips. Dino, noticing that terrifying smirk, began to sweat profusely. "You'll have to wait a moment, Dino," Guy announced smoothly. "The individual who actually holds the final authority over your fate will be arriving shortly." Dino maintained a sleepy, relaxed posture on the outside, but inside, he was in an absolute panic. He had assumed that convincing Guy Crimson was the only hurdle, since he was the undisputed leader of the Demon Lords. Hearing that someone else held a higher authority over this decision terrified him. "Calm down, Dino, you can do this," he told himself. "Should I pretend to be asleep? Yeah, if I act completely lazy and unbothered, they'll probably dismiss any suspicions that I'm planning a conspiracy. It's my only real option." Making up his mind, Dino crossed his arms on top of the table, rested his head down, and pretended to fall into a deep slumber. He closed his eyes tightly and waited for the mysterious individual to arrive. As the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew. 20 full minutes passed, and the mystery guest still hadn't shown up. Suddenly, he heard light footsteps entering the room. His initial thought was that it must be a common servant, because he couldn't detect a single shred of an aura. But then, a cold wave of realization hit him. He couldn't feel an aura or a single magicule radiating from this person. Not even a tiny bit. Even Veldanava himself had never completely erased his presence to this absolute degree, yet whoever just walked into the room was doing it flawlessly. Dino squeezed his eyelids shut, resisting the immense temptation to peek, and continued to fake a heavy sleep. Unfortunately for him, that was a catastrophic mistake. An absolute mountain of dense magicules and pure, unadulterated killing intent suddenly slammed directly into Dino. The violent pressure was so immense that it literally blasted him out of his chair, sending him crashing hard into the far wall. He scrambled to his feet, instantly readying himself to face the threat. But the moment his eyes locked onto the person standing in front of him, his jaw dropped. Beautiful. That was the absolute first thought that flashed through Dino's mind. First, you make me travel all the way over here, and then you have the audacity to pretend to be asleep right in front of me. That is incredibly rude, you know, the blue-haired maiden chided. Dino didn't even answer. He was completely captivated by the otherworldly beauty of this mysterious individual, his mouth still hanging wide open. Rimuru's forehead sprouted a massive tick mark. "I hate to break it to you, pal, but I don't roll that way. I'm a guy, so stop staring at me like that unless you want to be blasted through the wall a second time." "Ah. Right. No, I am incredibly sorry." "I completely lost my composure for a moment," Dino stammered, frantically apologizing as he scrambled back to his seat. "So," Rimuru said, sitting down and staring Dino dead in the eyes. Unlike Guy, he didn't bother hiding his immense suspicion. "Why exactly is a seraphim angel standing here demanding to join our alliance?" "Well, like I told Guy, I have absolutely nowhere else to." "Cut the complete nonsense," Rimuru interrupted flatly. "Your two friends, Pico and Gracia, are doing perfectly fine out there. I'm entirely certain you could just go join them and live a perfectly peaceful life in hiding. Why do you want to infiltrate us instead?" That specific question shocked Dino to his absolute core. Not only had this person instantly seen straight through his cover story, but he also knew the exact names of Pico and Gracia. "You aren't sitting here acting as a double agent for Feldway, are you, Dino Kuan?" Rimuru asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Dino turned completely pale, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Master," Ciel's voice echoed in Rimuru's mind. We currently know the exact coordinates of Feldway's original body. Shouldn't we simply eliminate him right now to save ourselves any future administrative trouble? Even though he's incredibly annoying, it's still far too early for him to die, Rimuru thought back. We will eliminate him when the timing is absolutely perfect. Dino sat there, completely frozen in terror. Although every fiber of his being wanted to deny the accusation, his horrified facial expression had already answered Rimuru's question perfectly. Feldway? You actually know who that is, Rimuru? Guy asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Not personally, but I've certainly heard of him, Rimuru replied calmly. He turned back to the trembling angel. I'm going to assume that silence is a firm yes, Dino-kun. Dino wanted to deny it, but he knew it was entirely futile. This blue-haired monster already knew absolutely everything. Left with no other choice, he slumped his shoulders and decided to be completely honest. Yes, that's correct. Perfect. Then I officially accept your application. You are entirely free to join us, Rimuru suddenly declared with a bright smile. Both Dino and Guy were completely dumbfounded by the sudden turnaround. Rimuru? Why on earth are you letting him join if we literally just confirmed he's a spy? Guy asked, raising an eyebrow. Dino wanted to ask the exact same thing, but he didn't dare open his mouth. The logic made absolutely no sense. It's incredibly simple, Guy. He is going to be our spy from now on, Rimuru explained with a mischievous grin. Through him, we can easily feed entirely false information back to Feldway and completely mislead their entire operation. So he's going to be a double agent for us, huh? Guy chuckled, instantly caught up on Rimuru's brilliant strategic wavelength. While the two of them casually discussed his future employment, Dino sat there feeling incredibly uneasy. The realization that they were openly demanding he betray Feldway and the others made his stomach turn. Rimuru noticed the conflicted expression on Dino's face and leaned over the table, a terrifying, menacing smile stretching across his face. You're going to do it perfectly, right, Dino-kun? Yes. Of course. I will absolutely do it. Dino stuttered out instantly, terrified for his life. Excellent. And just so we're entirely clear, you already know exactly what will happen to you if you dare to betray us, right? Rimuru added smoothly. Dino nodded his head so fast he nearly gave himself whiplash. Rimuru reached into the air, pulling a clean sheet of paper directly out of his imaginary space. He quickly scribbled a note, slipped it into a secure envelope, and melted a wax seal over the flap. He handed the letter straight to the trembling angel. Take this and travel directly to de Gruel's territory. He will know exactly what to do with you the moment he reads this, Rimuru commanded. Yes, sir. I will be on my way immediately then. Dino squeaked, grabbing the letter and sprinting out of the room as fast as possible. Once the doors clicked shut, Guy turned to Rimuru. All right, out with it. What exactly did you write in that letter, Rimuru? Oh, nothing really important, Rimuru laughed. I just asked de Gruel if he could babysit that lazy sleepyhead for a while. Sorry, de Gruel, Rimuru thought to himself with a grin. This time, it's my turn to send a problem child your way. If you say so, Guy chuckled. The two of them stood up from the table, completely ready to return to their daily routines. Chapter 27, Girl Talk in the Garden. Deep within the pristine confines of the imaginary space, three people sat comfortably around a beautifully decorated table in the middle of a vibrant garden. Technically, there was a fourth person present, but she was entirely occupied serving premium drinks and gourmet snacks to the other three. These individuals were none other than Ciel, Chloe, Velgrind, and Hinata. To a casual outsider, it might look like an entirely ordinary afternoon tea party among friends. But to the participants, this was an incredibly critical meeting. Chloe and Velgrind had officially completed the first phase of their rigorous training program, which covered everything regarding advanced combat prowess, magicule management, and the optimization of their ultimate skills. Now, the second phase of the curriculum was beginning, at least for Chloe. Velgrind, absolutely refusing to be left out of the loop, had simply tagged along to observe. Hinata was present strictly to fulfill her domestic duties as a maid. This specific role was a mandatory behavioral modification training assigned directly by Ciel, who had grown thoroughly annoyed by Hinata's hot-headed nature and her historical lack of respect toward everyone in existence, excluding Luminous. As Ciel delivered her formal lecture, Chloe listened in complete silence, absorbing every single piece of advanced spiritual information like a sponge. Velgrind, despite maintaining a thoroughly indifferent posture on the outside, was secretly paying rapt attention to every word that came out of Ciel's mouth. Unlike the other two, Hinata wasn't focusing on the lesson at all. Instead, she found herself blushing furiously from time to time at the blunt, shameless topics Ciel brought up. But since she desperately wanted to avoid any further severe punishments, she forced herself to maintain a perfect poker face, acting as if she were paying absolutely no attention whatsoever. But Ciel-san, Chloe suddenly complained, her lips forming a cute pout. In absolutely every single timeline loop I've experienced, no matter what I do, Sensei always treats me like a child. It doesn't matter how old I actually am, or the fact that I am technically older than him now. Ciel took a calm, elegant sip from her teacup before looking across the table. And you are sitting here telling me that you genuinely do not understand the root cause of that issue. Why is she acting like the answer is completely obvious? Chloe thought, entirely at a loss. I've tried changing my approach so many times and failed miserably. And what's with that dramatic tea-sipping gesture? Kranoa, who was actively listening from deep within Chloe's soul, was completely stumped as well. Ciel set her porcelain cup back onto the saucer, gesturing slightly for Hinata to pour a refill. She let out a long, dramatic sigh that left Chloe feeling even more confused. Tell me, Chloe, how exactly do you address my master whenever you speak to him? Ciel asked directly. Who? With Sensei, of course, Chloe answered automatically. Why? Good grief, Ciel muttered, rubbing her temples. You have spent countless centuries, across automated time loops, addressing him strictly as Sensei over and over again. And then you wonder why he continuously perceives you as a child, or rather, as his precious little student. Chloe's jaw practically hit the table. She felt incredibly foolish for missing something so blindingly obvious. To add even more fuel to her sudden internal panic, she realized that she had literally just called him Sensei a few seconds ago. Ciel-san, I completely see my mistake now, Chloe stammered, her face flushing. But would changing a single word really alter things that much? I mean, I've called him Rimuru-san a few times in the past, and it didn't magically fix the dynamic. The way you address him is merely a minor linguistic symptom, Ciel countered smoothly. The second, far more catastrophic problem is, well, it is honestly much more effective to just show you. See it for yourself. Ciel reached across the table and gently pressed her fingertip against Chloe's forehead. The moment their skin connected, a massive wave of pristine data from the original timeline flooded directly into Chloe's mind. She witnessed everything from the absolute conclusion of the Great War all the way to the final moment Rimuru met with her before embarking on his journey to the past. In those memories, the older version of Chloe was acting exactly like the young Chloe sitting at this table right now. Because of that behavioral loop, Chloe couldn't quite figure out what specific detail Ciel wanted her to realize. Noticing the blank expression on Chloe's face as the memory transfer concluded, Ciel let out another heavy sigh. As I suspected, you completely failed to see the point I am trying to make. I will make this entirely short and painless for you, Ciel stated bluntly. Visually, I see absolutely zero difference between the child version of Chloe and the version of Chloe who operated as a legendary teacher in Tempest after the Great War, aside from your physical maturity. Chloe blinked, listening intently. While it is true that you became remarkably mature, strict, and heroic around the rest of the world, the absolute moment my master enters your presence, you instantly regress into a spoiled child. You visit his office strictly to blush like a little schoolgirl and clumsily propose to him. Yet, we know from Alice, Kenya, and the others that you are fully capable of being an intimidating instructor, the demon teacher who made Shizu-san immensely proud. Furthermore, the entire Cardinal World praises you as a legendary chosen hero, and you've easily managed to put that insolent Leon Cromwell completely in his place whenever he tries anything funny. You possess an incredible list of powerful, mature traits, yet you display absolutely none of them when you are around Master. Do you finally comprehend what I am telling you? By the time Ciel finished her lengthy explanation, Chloe's face was completely bright red. First, she was utterly mortified to realize just how childishly she had been acting around Rimuru, constantly begging to be coddled. Second, receiving such high praise directly from Ciel made the compliments feel incredibly meaningful to her. Yes. I understand everything completely now, Ciel-san, Chloe said, a burning spark of pure determination suddenly lighting up her eyes. I am going to show Rimuru-sama that I am officially no longer a child. Keep that passion alive, Ciel approved with a satisfied nod, taking another sip of her freshly refilled tea. But as you already well know, Master is remarkably dense. Not just regular dense, he is an absolute black hole of dense. You will have to make your intentions blindingly clear to him. Rest assured, I will personally assist you with formatting your approach. Chloe flashed a bright, confident smile and gave Ciel a firm nod of alliance. Velgrind, realizing that their segment of the conversation was officially over, leaned forward and stared at Ciel with demanding, expectant eyes. Ciel set her teacup down once more before addressing the Cardinal Dragon. Your specific case is entirely different from Chloe's, Velgrind. As you have already observed from Master's retrieved memories, the two of you shared, well, a vastly different type of relationship in the original timeline. Velgrind listened closely. At the very beginning, you were bitter enemies. After the conflict resolved, your relationship technically improved, but you were entirely obsessed with Masayuki and continuously pushed Rimuru around like a total ragdoll from time to time. To be completely transparent with you, I am not particularly fond of you. It is true that your initial attack on Master was one of the direct catalysts that triggered my official birth into consciousness, but that does not change the fact that you severely angered him. As I said, your situation is... But Ciel-san. Velgrind interrupted, looking completely defeated but entirely refusing to back down. That was merely the version of me from your specific past timeline. She encountered Rimuru under completely different circumstances while being entirely dominated by Michael's ultimate authority, and she was fixated on Rudra's soul fragments. Unlike her, I have absolutely no lingering bonds to that past life anymore. Ciel narrowed her eyes slightly. Does that reality truly not bother you at all? Your alternate self invested her entire existence into Rudra and later Masayuki, sacrificing an immense amount of power for them. Even after learning that my master traveled from a completely different timeline to alter the past, it doesn't bother you in the slightest that he completely altered your destiny. No, I don't feel the same way as that alternate version of myself at all, Velgrind countered firmly. It's a simple fact that if it weren't for Rimuru, I would still be drifting around blindly accompanying Rudra. But unlike her, I originally traveled with Rudra simply because I was incredibly bored and he seemed like a mildly amusing mortal. We didn't spend nearly enough time together for me to develop a permanent, unbreakable soul bond. Well, as I stated, your case is still vastly different from Chloe's, Ciel concluded smoothly. Chloe has thoroughly proven her worth to me over consecutive centuries, earning her a legitimate spot to contend as a potential second wife. I will admit that it is unfair to continuously compare you to your alternate self. However, you have only known my master for a mere few months in this timeline, and all you have actually done is lounge around his palace and play cat and mouse games with Velzard. For the time being, you are entirely on your own. But if you manage to actively prove your worth to this household the way Chloe has, perhaps I will consider supporting your endeavors in the future. Velgrind's eyes instantly lit up with immense joy. Although it mildly stung to be compared to regular house pets in a cat and mouse analogy, she completely brushed the thought aside, flashing Ciel a massive, radiant smile. I will absolutely do my best to prove my worth to you, Velgrind declared proudly. Even if he doesn't immediately accept my feelings, I simply want to remain right by his side, no matter what the ultimate outcome is. Ciel nodded in calm approval, turning her head toward Hinata to signal for another refill. She noticed a tiny, flickering spark of hope reflecting in Hinata's eyes as well. Ciel's expression instantly flattened. Absolutely not. You are completely excluded from this conversation, Hinata. Hinata froze, her jaw tightening. During your very first encounter with Master in both this timeline and the original one, you launched immediate, lethal ambushes against him, actively trying to execute him on the spot. Even after a diplomatic peace was established, your administrative demands were one of the primary reasons he was doomed to spend consecutive years buried under a mountain of paperwork in his office. Because of Master's incredibly soft, forgiving nature, he constantly lets himself get bossed around by certain individuals, and you happen to be one of the primary culprits. You are literally thousands of years away from earning the right to give me that look of hope. Do I make myself entirely clear? Ciel concluded her sharp tirade, throwing a thoroughly unimpressed glare at the paladin. Hinata's face fell, but she maintained her rigid posture. Yes, Ciel-sama. Loud and clear. Chloe shot her friend a deeply pitiful look but wisely chose to remain completely silent. Velgrind, on the other hand, let out a smug little smirk, thoroughly pleased to have one less romantic rival to worry about in the future. With the intense girl talk officially concluded, Hinata and Chloe bowed and returned to their respective guest quarters to get some much-needed rest, while Velgrind transferred herself back to the main halls of the Palace of White Ice.